Hello and welcome to the Christmas Eve edition of the CBB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, also known as Dub Deuce 85, Double Dub, the artist that is known as Dub Deuce 85, FTN's niche extraordinaire, and whatever other goofy names that I could possibly think of. It's Christmas Eve, which means Christmas is right around the corner, as in tomorrow morning. Those of you who are grinding with me, we have a now 3-game CBB DFS slate tomorrow on DraftKings, a showdown on FanDuel, and I am going to take the time to break down those 3 games now with my favorite plays, as we like to do, PrizePicks options, all that good stuff that you can expect in a CBB Super Show, CFB Super Show. Anything that has the Super Show name attached to it, we are the best. There is going to be, I just noticed, an NBA show on FTN, so I will make sure that I'm done prior to them going on the air so you guys can watch both. Speaking of NBA, there is a promotion going on where we are doing the 12 Days of Christmas. If you want one of the NBA packages, you're not a member yet for whatever reason, 25% off all of the NBA packages if you use the code XMAS1. That's XMAS1. Day 2 starts on the 26th. So definitely do that. If you are not doing the pro sports thing and you want to get on board with the niche sports, you can use the gold package, which allows you access to all of esports, my college sports stuff, numerous other things. Use the code DUB. So it's streaming on the bottom there, DUB, for 20% off. So lots of good stuff going on there. Definitely get with FTN because not only do we have the best tools in the industry, and we have a lot of good articles and a lot of smart people on our team, but the Discord, man, not just the Discords that, I'd spend most of my time in, which is the college football and college basketball rooms, but NBA, NHL, MLB when it's going on, NBA, there's a lot of activity, and it's not just the content providers or the pros who are talking. The industry, or the rest of the community, I should say, is partaking, giving news, their opinions on stuff. And it's just a really good community. So I always harp about how the Discord pays for the sub alone. We've had numerous things with COVID going on again. I know it never really left, but this cancellation of games in all pro sports, college, we're losing games left and right. Players are opting out. Players are late scratches. We're seeing this, and in the Discord, some of this news is breaking 2-3 minutes before lock. We're tagging everybody. We're getting these guys out, and it ends up being a big edge because some of these players are 50, 60, 70% owned. So getting off somebody who is scratched or is out becomes a big edge, the biggest edge that we have in DFS at the moment. So keep that in mind. The Discord pays for it all. If you're watching live, I appreciate it. Thank you for spending your Christmas Eve with me. If you guys have any, comments, questions, concerns, definitely drop those in the YouTube chat there, and I'll answer those as we go. Also, if you're watching live, or even if you're watching on demand on Christmas morning, please hit that like button. That helps me with the YouTube algo and get my content seen when people type in, CBB and stuff like that. Appreciate it. All right, so let's dive in. We do, of course, have 3 games now instead of 4, unfortunately. That UNI Hawaii game that was actually going to be pretty DFS friendly has canceled. So Hawaii, obviously we had no sports today. I know that was tough for a lot of people. We had to actually, do other things that weren't sports related. Like spend time with our family. And I know that's a good thing. So don't make it seem like it's not. But Hawaii, they didn't play their bowl game today, so we didn't have that. Now they're not going to play a basketball game tomorrow. That was the 7th place game of the Diamond Head Classic, which for those of you who don't know is the Christmas tournament going on. Wasn't a huge deal, 7th place on the line, but a lot of fantasy friendly players in that game. Me particularly, I was going to have, 2-3 players from that game. Nate Heiss was somebody that we're going to hit on PrizePicks a bunch. Now we're not going to have him. Kamaka Hepa, Noah Coleman, all those guys are out. So make sure that you don't have any of those guys in your lineup. If you set your lineup early, make sure you get them out. All right, so we will start with Wyoming versus South Florida. I have Wyoming -8 at the moment, an over-under of 121.5. Let me start also by saying that the field for this Diamond Classic isn't the sexiest bunch of teams. A lot of slower-paced, okay offenses, okay defenses, just teams that aren't going to necessarily knock your socks off. Or when you think of CBB DFS, these aren't the teams that come to mind. So you're going to see some over-unders that aren't that appealing. 121.5 being one of them. This is the 5th place game, so winner gets the 5th place. Looking at it, there are a few options here and some that I was on the fringe about, but now that we have that cancellation for Hawaii, I'm certainly going to be more, I guess, insistent upon playing some players from this game, especially on the Wyoming side when it comes to paying up potentially. Some of the players that I'll be looking at now, Graham Ike, the 8.7K forward. He is a guy that I have a lot of interest in at this time. I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to get him into my lineup because, I was looking at, like I said, playing Heiss and Coleman and some of these other mid-range guys, but now I'm going to have salary to go up and potentially play some of these guys. So Graham Ike has really had a breakout sophomore season. He has a 35.4% usage rate, which is 3rd best in the country, a 32.7% shot rate, which is 30th percent, and a 31% combined rebounding rate. He is drawing the 4th most fouls in the country at 7.7, getting himself to the foul line a great deal. Just a guy that's going to give South Florida a lot of problems. So he is definitely, in my mind, worth that salary. He is a guy that does average 4.3 fouls per 40 on his own right. So he is a guy that could potentially foul too. But, the South Florida team, there are a couple of guys like Kayla Murphy and Javon Green who do draw fouls, but the bigs really don't. And as far as rebounding efficiency goes, the South Florida team isn't that good. They are 242nd in defensive rebounding efficiency, 108th in offensive rebounding efficiency. So they're pretty bottom tier when it comes to actual rebounds, and that's where Ike is going to do a lot of his damage. They also get their shot blocked at a pretty high rate, so Ike could maybe, get a few block shots as well. Not necessarily his forte. More on the rebounding side and getting to the foul line. So I like Ike's ability to play 30 plus minutes in this game. If this is a game where he does see 36 like he did against Utah Valley, he'll absolutely shatter the slate. Northern Iowa, he had some foul issues. He played 17 minutes, still scored 12.6 rebounds, 2 assists, decent game. Really what I'd be looking for here is like what he put up against Stanford in 31 minutes when he had a 42% usage rate in that particular game, took 18 shots, 25 points, 11 rebounds, assist, and a steal. So that is really what we, would be best case scenario paying up for him. And I don't know that the field, even now that it's a 3-game slate, will necessarily be paying up for him. So I like him a lot. Hunter Maldonado, he's been kind of the face of this program for the last couple of years. He's fallen off a little bit. He still has a pretty high usage rate at 27.8%, shot rate 22.8%, assist rate of 31.2%, and he's drawing over 6 fouls per 40. So that's really good. That's a career high for him on the fouls drawn, a career high in assist rates. His true shooting percentage, he's got a career high in that. Back in 2020, he had a 28.6% shot rate. This is the 2 seasons ago, the 1920, not 2021. So his shot rate's kind of fallen off as he hasn't been necessarily the go-to guy as much as before, or when he had a 30% usage rate, but he's doing more things now, like, dealing dimes, drawing fouls, rebounding a little bit. But main thing is just that assist number. And with Graham Ike's emergence, he's been able to really, kind of step up that part of his game. So Maldonado is a decent option as well. 8-5, you're not going to play him and Ike together. You'll have to make that decision. I think it's probably a safer bet that Maldonado is going to play more. And maybe his raw points, thus have a better shot at being high. But I still think Ike is the better overall play, even if he plays less minutes, which is most likely going to happen. The rest of the impact players we're looking at: Xavier Dussel, Jeremiah Oden, and Drake Jeffries rounding out the starting 5. Bench players who are kind of, they run like a 7-8 man rotation, typically 7. Hunter Thompson, not Hunter S. Thompson, who had been kind of an impact player starting lineup the last couple of seasons. Now he's a role player, and Kenny Foster. So those 2 guys coming off the bench. Dussel is kind of interesting. He plays 83.2% of the minutes, so he's playing a lot. Jeremiah Oden has a 7.5% offensive rebounding rate, so he could do some damage on the rebounding side of things. A 4.6% block rate, could definitely do some damage blocking shots on USF down low. And then Drake Jeffries is a 46% 3-point shooter. So you have kind of a myriad of players here that all do something a little different. This lineup kind of gels together quite well. The team that Jeff Linder has been able to build has been pretty solid. And I mean, they're off to a 10-2 record, wins over my Washington boys. They, Arizona, they got shelled. They lost that 3-point game to Stanford. They beat a tough Grand Canyon squad though. A tough Northern Iowa team. So, they're definitely a good team, probably not going to be, winning the MWC anytime soon, but they're not a pushover squad by any means. They have good continuity and they gel well. And there's something to be said in the college ranks about a team with good continuity. South Florida, there's really not a ton for me to like necessarily, but there's two players in particular that we are going to be looking at for the Bulls. That starts with Kayla Murphy playing 80% of the minutes, 26.2% usage rate, 25.9% shot rate, and a 30.6% assist rate. He's drawing 4.9 fouls per 40. You're going to see on this slate there is a trend. There's a lot of players who are drawing, 4.5, 5, 6, 7 fouls per 40 and getting themselves to the foul line. That's important, and you guys hear me talk about it quite a bit because in games where there's, projected to be close, and all the games today, sorry, I was itching here, that seem to be close. So there's potential for down the stretch, last 2, 3, 4 minutes of fouls to be in play, sending guys to the foul line, these free throws, and you want these guys who are getting themselves to the foul line, or they're going to have the ball in their hands in that situation, because how often do you see, in that last 2.5 minutes, all of a sudden your guys got 8 free throws and you're pushed over the top in your top 10 in a tournament, as opposed to min cashing just because of that. So Kayla Murphy is going to be a guy that, if they're ahead in the last couple minutes, he'll get himself to the foul line. They'll be fouling him. He's emerging quite a bit. Because of the free year, he's technically still a freshman, but he did play last year and he's really looks good. He's going to be the future of this program. So definitely don't sleep on him. George Mason transfer Javon Green is the other player that I would be interested in. Playing roughly 74% of the team's minutes. Usage rate's about 21%, pushing there, almost a 5% steal rate, which is top 25 in the country. And he is also drawing 4.5 fouls per 40. 43 free throw attempts, Murphy 48. Nobody else on the team has anywhere close. The next closest would be 20 for Jameer Chaplin and 20 for Russell Chua, who has actually missed a couple of games, but just came back. He's another guy that draws a decent amount of fouls. So Green and Murphy are going to be the key cogs for these guys. And at 5'9", Green, I could see him being relatively popular, playing 31, 32 minutes. And then Murphy at 6'7", being maybe the lower owned guy. So that's the pivot. He is 800 more. So if you don't have that salary, I could see maybe, going to Green to save it. But with the mid-range guys like Haas and Coleman that are no longer available, I think that we can get to Murphy quite easily. And if he's going to be somewhere between, 10 to 15% owned, when maybe he should be closer to 25, 30, then I'm definitely on board. Other guys, Jameer Chaplin, Jalen McCreary, Jake Boggs, they kind of represent the rest of the rotation. South Florida doesn't have a very appealing rotation. They go pretty deep, I'd say. I would say that Russell Chua, who has missed a couple of games after an injury, he did come back in their last game, played just 5 minutes. He's typically a mid-20, 28-minute guy. He's lower-end value play, but if he is back in the starting lineup, he's definitely a guy that I would look at if you're running multiple lineups tomorrow / today, whenever you're watching this. He could be a kind of like one of those sneakier plays that no one's going to use. He's only 4'9", and if he were to get back into that 25-minute mark at 4'9", I think he could pay that price point off, even against a tougher Wyoming defense. He does have a 12.5% offensive rebounding rate and an 18.5% usage rate, so he's not a scrub by any means. Corey Walker is only 3K. He had been injured for most of the season, and he just recently came back. He's a 6'8" freshman, true freshman. He came back against, I believe, Austin P, and then he's played 2 minutes against Florida the game after. But in this tournament, he played 17 minutes against BYU, and then this last game yesterday against Hawaii, he did start for the first time this season, and he played 19 minutes. 6 points, 3 rebounds, and assists, 4 steals. Obviously, the steals we can't count on. His steal percentage is 8.3%, but he's played 4 games. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, this guy's a steal, specialist or anything like that. But the fact that he's min price, if he starts, we can expect 20-ish minutes from him. I think he's a fair value. We may not necessarily need him unless you're going superstars and scrubs and you want to play him. We're going to get into some of these Stanford, Vandy value guys on the BYU side as well. You could definitely play 4 values and then play, Pippen, Graham, Ike, Ingram, and then McGee, who Darius McThree is going to be one of our core plays we talk about in a second. That's a doable lineup. So if you want to play Corey Walker at 3K, I definitely think it's viable. He also comes with guard forward eligibility, so you can move him around a bit wherever you might need him. Some people, they have these unrealistic expectations about 3K guys because we were so spoiled this season. The first month of the season, we had guys at 3K to 4.7 that were the Terrell Browns, David Jones of the world that were dropping 10, 12, 13X games. That's really not something that we should usually expect from 3K. If we get 12 from Walker at the 3K, we're happy, especially on this slate, which I expect to be relatively low scoring compared to what we just saw the other day when it took, damn near 400, being sarcastic, 300 to Bink and 255 to min cash. Shouldn't be a slate like that, knock on wood. So that's pretty much the Wyoming, South Florida game. Let me pull this up here. Yeah, I love betting against Hawaii for sure. The under on Hawaii games and just Hawaii in general, taking the spread against them has been profitable all season, especially in this tournament. They have some good pieces, but yeah, they're not a very good team. Hawaii sports in general aren't very good, but I won't get into that right now, even though I was just complaining about Hawaii's football program on Twitter for the last couple hours. All right. So next game we have here is Liberty versus BYU in the semifinal. So this is for third place. And BYU minus 9.5 and over under of 132.5. So that feels like 150 on this particular slate. Tempo rankings, Liberty 329th, BYU 116th. Actually neglected to say tempo rankings for Wyoming 292. USF 341, 2 slow teams. So don't expect a fast break fest or anything. Liberty is led by our guy Darius McGee. We all call him in the Discord Darius McThree. We started doing that last year. I'm sure everyone around the industry does. He scored 41 real points yesterday in a very close loss against Stanford on 28 shots. 15 of those shots was triple. So he's going to be taking a lot of shots. He's got the green light. He's the star of the squad. He has a 38.3% shot rate, which is number 1 in the country. So he has the highest shot rate in the country, pushing 40%. He is, those of you who have been grinding, CBB the last couple of years, or just pay attention, approaching Marcus Howard levels. Marcus Howard's last 2 years at Marquette, he was 38, 40% shot rate. There was never a shot that he wasn't willing to take. That's kind of where McThree's at this point. Now, he has to carry the load because he doesn't have any consistency from the rest of his team. Keegan McDowell, Kyle Rhodes, Shiloh Robinson, Joseph Vincent. There's all these guys playing. They're about an 8-9 man rotation, which isn't super deep. It's not like Memphis 12, man rotation or Texas, but it's still a little deeper. We like to zone in on these teams that are running that 6-7 man rotation when possible. So for Liberty, McThree should be chalky. He is a core play. I'm not, going to sit here and chat about that for too long because that's obvious. I will say Shiloh Robinson is a pretty interesting value guy. He was relatively high owned last time Liberty was on the slate because of his price. He's only 3.5. We can expect him to probably play 25 to 30 minutes. The matchup isn't super ideal against BYU, but we do know that BYU is starting to maybe look a little overrated. I know they're 10-3, but after they lost that game to Utah Valley, they kind of struggled against Utah State. They did end up winning that game. They lost to Creighton in a game that wasn't really that close. And then the tough loss yesterday against Vanderbilt. So they're a beatable unit. I think Liberty has some guys who can do some damage. So Shiloh Robinson definitely in play for value. Had one of the highest offensive ratings on the team, an offensive rebounding rate of 7.4%, drawing about 4 fouls per 40. Keep in mind he's sitting at about 3.4 FC per 40 on his own right, fouls called. And he has 37 free throw attempts, second on team behind Darius McGee at 39. So Shiloh does a very good job of putting himself in a situation to generate points, and we love guys who generate points. Keegan McDowell is a guy who we continue to fall in the trap of him, not necessarily on DFS, but on PrizePicks. His PrizePicks are always like 15.5, 16, 17. And you'd think a guy playing 30, 35 minutes would be a lock. So we keep hitting the over, and he's really only hit the over once out of his last 5 games, I think. Stills is watching. Stills is one of the other guys who has been victimized by Keegan McDowell. He doesn't do a lot besides shoot. So when he's cold, it's a rough afternoon for him. He is shooting 45% from long range, so he doesn't get cold too often, but it just seems like maybe the last 3 to 4 games have been his cold games, because if you look at it and see what he scored, 9.5 fantasy points. He did have 18 against UNI, 8, 12.5, and then the 28 against the non-D1. So it's been a struggle. He is going to play big minutes. He's only 4.8. I think I would rather play Shiloh, because there's only a handful of players that I really will play that don't get, secondary stats like rebounds, assists, blocks, that really only rely on scoring. Cam Thomas of LSU from last year, I know he's on Brooklyn now, was one of those guys that I didn't mind because his peripheral stats were pretty low and relied on scoring, but he always scored 28 real, so it didn't matter. So very few guys that I will not play. I'm sorry, very few guys that I will play. I didn't hit any the eggnog yet, I promise. That I will play that don't get extra stats. So McDowell's kind of like a lower end value to me. I could very much see him get hot, hit 5 threes, and make value, but I would probably feel more comfortable with Shiloh Robinson in my main. However, I'm not looking to stack Liberty either. It's Darius McThree for me, and then I'll have to decide here the rest of the way. On the BYU side, I'm certainly going to be targeting them relatively heavy, but it's not going to be their guards like Barcello or Tejon Lucas, like you guys might think. And their prices are up there, 8, 4, 7, 6. I don't mind them. I think they're fine, but they're really more GPP plays. To me, this matchup against Liberty, we want to be targeting front court players or players who excel at rebounding, have high offensive, defensive, or combined rebounding efficiency rates. The reason being is Liberty is 306 in offensive rebounding efficiency, 124th in defensive. There were a couple rebounding props for Stanford guys in their last game, Harrison Ingram being one of them, that we hit. Me and a buddy of mine, we hit on those, over 5.5, over 6.5 stuff, because Liberty, I know they'd give up a lot of rebounds, and it worked out quite well. Stanford actually out-rebounded them 38-22. So I would expect BYU's massive front court to take advantage. Now, BYU's a little short in the front court. They've got injuries. They've got guys who are out. So there's really just 2 or 3 guys that are going to take advantage of that, but they're really good at what they do. And just to kind of drive home, before the 38-22 game against UNI, they lost that rebounding battle 31-25 as well. Not as big a margin, but still you're seeing teams get 30-plus rebounds against them. For BYU, Richard Hardward has been out. Gavin Baxter is out for the season. Sounds like unfortunately his career may be done. They did just get Gideon George back. He's been banged up. So the guys that we're going to look at here, and it goes without saying, he wasn't low owned on that last BYU slate, but he went nuts. A lot of people had him, most of the sharp players. He had 32 fantasy points, 15 rebounds, 9 points in 25 minutes. So I'm talking about Fousseyni Traore, and he's going to be a big play for us. He's a core play. He should be chalky at that 4.9 price based off what he did. This is a dream matchup for him in this, rebounding advantage that BYU has. They're going to do a lot of damage in the front court. I think Liberty has the chops defensively to maybe give Barcello and Lucas a little trouble, so they're going to rely on that front court. Traore has a 14.4% offensive rebounding rate, which is top 50 in the country. Combined rate over almost 40%. So what is it? 39% combined. A 6.8% block rate. Fairly decent at getting himself to the line. He draws about 4.5 fouls per 40. He's shooting for he's not a super big man. He's 6'6", but he's shooting at 73% at the line. Guys in the front court, tend to have this maybe unfair, thought of them not being good free throw shooters, but he's a guy that can capitalize on that. So Fousseyni is a guy that you want to get exposure to in your main build and otherwise. I also really like Caleb Lohner here. I think this is a guy we could have maybe at some lower ownership. With everybody going Fousseyni, Lohner 6K. He's probably not going to project all that well. So people, when they're slaves to the optos, these are the type of plays that we get that we like to call posh plays that are a little sneakier, are going to be as owned, and are between that 6 and 8K price point that we can take advantage of. Lohner has a 9.7% offensive rebounding rate, a combined rate well over 30%. Another guy that does a decent job of getting himself to the foul line. He has 29 attempts on the year. Not the very good free throw shooter at 55%, but he does get them. We do have to be aware, though, that he has 5 fouls per 40 on his own. So this is a play that could pick up 2 early ones and frustrate us. But the good thing about Liberty is their front court doesn't necessarily take advantage of that. It would be, if McThree or another one of their guards drives to the hoop and he cheats over and doesn't play good straight up defense. So there's some risk here with him at 6K price if he gets into foul trouble. But the fact that he could be 8, 9, 10% on a 3-game slate really kind of is appealing to me. I know, if you look through his logs, you're going to see a lot of, 16, 12s and 18s, which is going to turn people off, but this will be the matchup for him. If he can get somewhere between 25 to 30 points or 30 minutes, I could see 5X here. So, you see the USF game, which is in this tournament just a couple of days ago, he had 14 rebounds. It would not shock me to see him put up a big rebounding total here next to Troer. And then the GPP play would be Gideon George at 5.6, just because his price is a little high for his minutes. We're looking at a guy who's going to play roughly 20 minutes. He's kind of had his fouls under control this year, but he's kind of a higher FPPM guy, fantasy point per minute. So he could very well in 20 minutes, put up 20 plus fantasy points and still make value. I don't know that his ceiling is super high, but he's another guy with a good rebounding efficiency rate, 11% offensive rebounding rate, 23.1% defensive rebounding rate. So that's the 3 guys, Loner, Troer, and George, who could take advantage of this matchup against Liberty. So George being the GPP guy and Loner and Troer being my kind of main team guys. And then, like I said, Barcello and Lucas. Sean Lucas is playing big minutes, but man, he's just his rates lately have been awful. Shot rate has kind of gone down a little bit, actually. The last couple of games, his usage rate has been under 20% in this tournament and the game before that against Weber. When heading into the tournament, he had an average usage rate of 28.5%. So I don't know what's going on there. I'm really not too keen on using him. I would rather just go up to Barcello, but even then, like I said, I'm not super high on the guards. I want to use the forwards in this particular matchup. All right, so that brings us to the last game and the championship between Johnny's Stanford boys and Vanderbilt. So not a really exciting title game. I thought it was going to be Stanford versus BYU, but alas, Vanderbilt pulled off the victory. And Jerry Stackhouse has been a good coach to this point. We do have Vandy minus 1.5. That was as of this morning. I think it may have gone to 2 now. 135 over under, so fairly high. Ken Pom has it a 1-point game, 68-67. Vanderbilt 269th tempo ranking, Stanford 107. Jared Haas, man, he's done a great job recruiting, and he's kind of has that Lorenzo Romar of the Huskies a couple years ago, where he'd bring in good recruits, good players, and then he didn't know how to use them. And it kind of feels like, I guess the fans, the program, and everything are kind of tired of him. If Johnny's anything to be said about it, he complains about him every day. People are clamoring for him to go, and he's just mediocre enough to stay, I guess, and he's bringing in recruits. But brought in Harrison Ingram, probably a one and done. Ingram has been used oddly, sort of like Zaire Williams last year, where he would play, 35 minutes and get all the usage, and then sometimes he'd be playing 18 minutes and get hardly any usage. Now, he did have a game I think it was 2 or 3 games ago. He got 2 early fouls, which did affect his minutes. The last game, he played over 30, and that's where I think he'll settle in, and we should expect him to be playing 30, 35 minutes if Haas is smart. Not saying he is. But he is an aggressive defender that does get himself into early foul trouble. He has had several games, 2 out of his last 5, where he picked up 2 early ones reaching. I've watched those games. So, they're very well. The 8.6 price tag is kind of chunky for his production. However, he is capable of putting up 40 plus. We know he can, but he hasn't really shown that in the tournament. And now he's playing a Vanderbilt team that has size, can check him, is full of a bunch of role players that kind of, clog the lane and know that they're, not superstars, and they do what their abilities allow them, and everybody fills a role. Stackhouse has done a good job kind of building around Scottie Pippen. Jordan Wright's emerged a little bit. So this isn't like a super soft matchup like it has been in the past against Vanderbilt. That being said, I do think Ingram's in play at 8-6 because of the lack of options after the Hawaii game was taken from us. However, I do think I prefer Jaden Delaire for 1,600 less, especially now, the beginning of December, maybe or late November, he inserted Jaden Delaire back into the starting lineup, which was obviously a smart decision. I don't know why he didn't start him to start the year, but Delaire has definitely emerged from a role player his first 2 years to a guy that, as a senior, is one of the better players on the team. Highest usage rate on the squad at 27.1%, second highest shot rate behind Max Morrell, who doesn't play as much, 25.7% shot rate, 8.7% offensive rebounding rate, a 3% block rate, and be still my heart, he draws 6.5 fouls per 40, 64% free throw shooter. He has 62 free throw attempts in 12 games. That is a lot when most of these teams, even guys like McGee, who are on the floor a lot, have 43, 45. So he is getting to the foul line a lot. Isn't converting a ton of them, but 6 of every 10 is still okay, I guess. Takes threes, makes about 31%. So I prefer Delaire. His minutes are, he's going to start, and his minutes are pretty consistently in that mid-20s, sometimes upper 20s. So I'm comfortable with him. As far as anyone else or the secondary Stanford players, it's not going to be James Keefe or Michael O'Connell, who's okay at 6'1", and I think he's fine to use. Spencer Jones, who's okay at 6'4". I know he just had a big game. It's actually going to be Brandon Angel, who's only 3'6". Angel is interesting and a guy that I think is going to potentially be one of those 4-year guys that kind of, senior year becomes like this really solid player, maybe like second team Pac-12 type of performer. Maybe I'm a little overzealous, but watching this kid play the last couple of games, I feel like he has a lot of talent, and Haas just needs to play him more. 3 of his last 4 games, he's played over 20 minutes. He's kind of pushing like he should be a starter, to be honest. Scored 17 in that that win, I should say, against Liberty, 6 rebounds, an assist, and a block. The game before that against Wyoming, he had 7 points, 6 rebounds. So he's doing a pretty decent job on the glass. 4.5% offensive rebounding rate, just about a 19% combined rate, but that's total season. You look at his last couple of games where he's played the 20-plus minutes, those rates have been a lot higher. His usage rate has been pushing 20% as well during that span. So I do like the sophomore to be one of the, I guess, higher-end values on the slate. And I think he has the potential to play, 25, 26, maybe even upper 20s minutes. Also draws 4 fouls per 40, has 25 attempts. He does have a fouls called rate of 4.2, but keep in mind that is skewed slightly just because some of the other games he played like 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and he had 2 or 3 fouls during that 7 minutes, which really skewed his number. During a full 25 to 28 minutes, his foul rate hasn't been nearly that high. That being said, I'll probably pick up 2 early ones. And then I don't really think like I said, I'm not really messing with James Keefe. I know he had a big game on the slate the other day, but he just kind of feels like a really weak play to me. I would rather just play Angel or Delaire, or if you want to go up and get Ingram and hope for one of his ceiling games, which is totally possible against Vanderbilt, by all means, I wouldn't hate it. On the Vanderbilt side, it's 2 players who do the majority of the scoring, and then like I said, a bunch of role players. So Scottie Pippen Jr., who everybody knows, 8.9K, and then the emergence of Jordan Wright at 7.9, and that price for Wright feels really quite gross to me. I don't know that I could get behind playing that. I think he's fine in GPP, but that price feels real bad. Even paying 9K for Pippen doesn't feel that great because he hasn't quite had the season that I think most of us expected him to have just yet. But last year, he really came on during SEC play and was putting up 40s with regularity. So I'm not ready to write him off just yet. And especially on a short slate, I think you got to have exposure. If it came down to him or Ingram, I would pay the extra $300 for Pippen. He has a usage rate of 31.3%, a 32.1% shot rate. Both of those are top 40. Playing 77% of the team's minutes, has an assist rate of 21%, steal rate of 3.5%, and he's drawing 6.2 fouls per 40. 67 free throw attempts in 12 games. So another guy with 60-plus free throw attempts. He does a really good job. He is one of the better SEC players, at least last year, during conference play that would rack up late points at the free throw line consistently. Jordan Wright has a 24.8% shot rate, 24.2% usage rate. He's drawing 4.3 fouls per 40. So the junior has really gone from career, I guess, role player. He always had a pretty decent shot rate, hovering around 19, 20%. But he's really stepped up this year and been much more of a consistent producer. And he's playing, mid 30s minutes. So a guy that's out there for that length needs to be producing, and he is, whether that's at, on the glass, stealing or otherwise. I don't want to make you think he's a bad player. I don't know. I can't pay that price for him yet. There are some injuries that the team has dealt with or has been dealing with. So we could be looking at slightly different starting five. Jermaine Mann, who's been dealing with the injury. Miles Stute had been getting minutes in his time. He did start the last game. He had a really nice game actually against BYU. Knocked down 5 of his 9 shots, played 32 minutes, and he started. So Miles Stute is a guy that I think is certainly viable as a value option if he starts again. And I would expect him to. It's 4-3. I don't believe Mann's going to suddenly play. So at 4-3, he's definitely main team viable. He fills a forward spot, which is typically a tougher spot to fill on DK. And I think if he starts and you can guarantee 30 minutes, there's really no reason probably not to use him. He has a 4.1% block rate. He does fair enough damage down low, but he's also shooting 42% from long range on 53 attempts. So he's definitely a tough guard. His production recently has pushed Tyron Lawrence, who had started every game this season prior to this tournament, and has been moved to the bench and is only playing 7 to 10 minutes, kind of an afterthought right now. And Stu is kind of taking over that spot. Quentin Malora Brown is somebody that I feel is a pretty strong value as well. At sub 5K price tag, he has a 13.3% offensive rebounding rate, so he's definitely holding his own on the glass. 29% combined, 5.5% block rate. He is getting himself to the foul line a fair amount of times, which you like for a big, and playing semi-decent minutes. He does have a foul rate under 4, which is nice to see for a guy his size. His career, he's been nearly a 5 fouls per 40 guy. So the fact that he's got that number under 4 is good to see. In that last game there against BYU in 31 minutes of action, he had just the 4 points, but 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal for 27. So I think at 4.8, he can give us 4x against Stanford. He's not going to be a solid source of points necessarily, but his secondary stats are very strong for a guy his price, especially with, like I said, Mann banged up, Lawrence kind of, going to the bench, and really, none of these other guys, Frank, Dezzoni, Trey Thomas, doing much of anything. So there's a lot of just guys who are getting these 10 to 15 minutes where it's Pippen, Wright, and now Malora Brown playing the bigger minutes and potentially Stute. Rodney Chapman, the transfer, he's just recently been able to play, started playing right before this tournament, 16, 17, and 24 minutes in his last 3 games that he's been back this season. So you see his minutes are trending up. He's 5'2". Chapman is an okay play. He was just kind of a role player type at Dayton. He was much better his freshman and sophomore seasons, and then he kind of just fell off a bit. He had flashes of being good when he was at Chattanooga, but this is his 3rd stop now, and I think he just kind of is who he is. So I think he's okay. His minutes going to trend up, if he's going to play 25 to 30 now potentially, but he's certainly not a guy that I'm going to be prioritizing by any means. All right, so that wraps up the 3 games. As far as core goes, we had to change it a little bit now because of the fact that Coleman was out, and he was part of our 3-man core originally. So take him out. Darius McThree, obvious. Fousseyni Traore, that's our 2nd core piece. And then we have to come up with a 3rd core now. And I don't want to be super chalky, but I think it's probably going to come to that, unfortunately. And as far as who that's going to be, I think it'll be a cheap guy. I really wanted to play Hepa too. That's tough. I think the other member of my core is going to be Malora Brown from Vanderbilt at 4.8. He's just a little too cheap there. He fills a forward slot for us, allows us to pay up at the guard spots if we wish with a guy like Pippen. But I'm also pretty high in Brandon Angel, so it's kind of like maybe third spot core 1A, 1B between Angel and Malora Brown. And then you've got Stute in there too, which I may wait to see if he starts. If that's the case, maybe I'd be willing to play him over Malora Brown, but that is the last game. So we are able to kind of, sit on that. And with a lot of value being in that last game, if you were to play Stute and he didn't start, you could easily pivot off of him to someone else like Angel or Malora Brown. The FanDuel is just a showdown, so I don't have a core for them. PrizePicks plays, I had a ton for Nate Heiss, so wipe all of those away, and obviously no Coleman's. I have 3, actually, and Kamakahapa, so I only have 2 that are listed now. So let me pull up to see if I have any others. But the 2 that are still on the board, Miles Stute over 14.4 fantasy points. Now, if he weren't to start, that would obviously be a problem. If he starts, I think he hits that no problem 16 plus. You may not have that luxury to wait as you're building your multi-sport plays or getting them earlier in the day. I know there was one in the NBA for Julius Randle, right? Yep. Okay. It's still there. 96. So 0.5 points. So I goes without saying, if you're looking for some additional plays to pair up or triple up or quad up or whatever with that Randle play, which is obviously a no brainer, then you can pop some of these CBB guys on here. Stute over 14.4 fantasy points and Caleb Lohner over 7 rebounds. Might feel like a lot. I did mention 2 games ago he had 14. He's had a couple of 7 or 8 within the last month as well. And he gets this really good matchup against Liberty that is getting out rebounded consistently. Liberty is that quintessential, live by the 3, die by the 3 team. They don't put themselves in a good position for offensive rebounds. There's a lot of one and done possessions for them. And I could see Caleb just rack up easy rebound after easy rebound on these 3-point shots. So I definitely like the over 7 rebounds there. Some other options that we can look at now that there are some games canceled. I like Kayla Murphy over 12.5 single points. I think that one might have been a little cheaper earlier in the day, but even against Wyoming, he's their primary scorer. So look for him to score, 15, 16 real. So give me that over 12.5. Pulling up a couple others. The Keegan McDowell, I don't want to get sucked into his fantasy points, but he could legit score 14 real points and still not hit 16 fantasy points. So over 10.5 real for him seems relatively strong. And then I would say, let's see what Jaden Delaire's is, because Jaden Delaire over 22.8 fantasy points. Harrison Ingram over 25.8 fantasy points. Either one of those I would be fine with as well. Not a super big amount of slam dunks on this one, but the slate's just not full of all these great fantasy teams. I also like Caleb Lohner over 18.3 fantasy points. I don't know. I'm feeling a big game from Caleb. He's Mr. Sunshine. He's got that blonde frizzy hair. He just doesn't look like he's going to be tough on the court, but when he gets out, he's doing some damage. So I think before I go off the air here, I will tag him with the Posh play of the day, a play that is hitting at a fairly high rate. I only think we've missed 1 or 2 in the last month. And for those that are watching that don't know what Posh play is, that's basically what used to be the sneak play. And by hitting, I mean that they go, lower own, sub 20%, and they hit for 4x or more, typically 5x plus. So I like Lohner for the 30 fantasy point game on Christmas Day. Give it to us, brother. As far as the rest of the schedule, there is some college football, bowl games. There's Ball State versus Georgia State. No write-up for that one, but I will post my thoughts in the CFB Discord, and I'll be playing it, of course. We have a couple of games Monday, Tuesday, and then there is a 4-game slate coming up. So expect Jake Kuchek, my partner in crime for college football, to have a show for that next slate that is over 3 or 4 games for the CFB Super Show. After Christmas and we start rolling out, we won't have any college basketball slates on Sunday, obviously. Monday, and then the 27th looks like it might only be a showdown, maybe 2 games. And then after that, we should start rolling into some big slates. We'll get Mike on there for big Tuesday, big Wednesday slates. And then it's just going to be all college basketball, 3, 4, 5 shows a week, guys. So appreciate the continued support. If you're not a member of FTN yet, what are you doing? Get over there and get in the Discord and make yourself some money. Appreciate it, guys. Merry Christmas to everyone. And hopefully you don't get lumps of coal in your stocking or in your bankroll. See you guys.